Welcome to this explainer, officially titled TEMA 21 Notebook LM. Today, we're diving straight into a really rigorous linguistic analysis that's completely designed to elevate your understanding of English spatial prepositions. Now, if you've ever felt that prepositions are just this chaotic mess of random exceptions that you have to painfully memorize, well, prepare to have your mind changed. We are going to unlock the hidden, almost mathematical elegance of the English language, and we're going to equip you with the conceptual tools you need to master spatial location at a true CEFR C2 level. It's going to be a fascinating ride. Here is the agenda for our lecture today. We'll start with the relational essence of spatiality, then move into the geometric framework, and follow up with the dynamics of movement. After that, we'll look at relative positioning, dialectal variations, and wrap everything up with the pedagogical implications. So let's jump right into Section 1, the relational essence of spatiality. You see, a spatial preposition isn't just some random vocabulary word you drill with flashcards. Not at all. It is a fundamental cognitive domain. According to cognitive linguistics, a preposition takes what's called a trajector, which is basically the moving or located entity, and maps it against a landmark, which serves as your reference point. What we're truly examining here is how our own human physical embodiment dictates our syntactic rules. It expresses a relationship between two entities, situating one in reference to the exact other, completely based on our physical experience in the world. And these phrases function incredibly fluidly as post-modifiers or adverbials, which perfectly illustrates this beautiful intersection between semantic meaning and hard syntax.
That brings us perfectly to Section 2, the geometric framework.
I actually like to call this the geometry of grammar. According to the highly comprehensive frameworks laid out by scholars like Quirk and Greenbaum, English actually organizes space mathematically. We literally build up steadily from 0 dimensions all the way to 3. So let's start at 0 dimensions. This is a simple point location. When you conceptualize a place as just a dimensionless coordinate, entirely ignoring its physical size, you use at. You are at the bus stop. Now, even a massive metropolis can be 0-dimensional. For example, a transcontinental flight might refuel at London if we're strictly looking at abstract points on a global map. Now, step up to 1 dimension. That's a line or a path, and the geometry here demands on. A city is on the River Thames. Step up again to 2 dimensions, a surface plane, and we still use on. That's true whether it's a vertical plane, like a picture on the wall, or an overhead plane, like a fly on the ceiling. And finally, we reach 3 dimensions. When your landmark is conceptualized as a volume, a specific area, or an enclosed container, we shift to in, like being in a box or walking in a park.
But here is where cognitive linguistics provides this absolutely fascinating layer of nuance. Cognitive semanticists, notably Tyler and Evans, argue that prepositions don't just objectively map geometric physical reality. No, they depend entirely on the subjective construal of the speaker. It's really about how your mind chooses to conceptualize the space. Think about grass for a second. If the grass is freshly mown and short, you perceive it topologically as a flat, 2-dimensional plane, right? So you naturally say you are sitting on the grass. But if that grass is overgrown and it physically surrounds you, it starts acting as a 3-dimensional volume. So suddenly, you are sitting in the grass. Consider furniture. You sit in an armchair because its elevated arms actually create an enclosed 3D volume around your body. However, you sit on a dining chair because your brain conceptualizes it simply as a flat 2D surface supporting you. You change the grammar because your mind has actively changed the geometry.
Okay, so we've built up this highly precise, static, geometric world. But human experience isn't static, is it? We move around. And this raises a really crucial question. How does English conceptualize spatiality when motion is actually introduced?
Let's find out in Section 3, the dynamics of movement.
When we introduce kinematic application, we're looking at what linguists call telic movement, which is basically movement that has a clear, defined endpoint. The grammar of English demands a really strict logical sequence here. The dynamic path logically precedes the static location. So when you have a completive movement toward a place, you use to, like driving to Oxford. This action then culminates in what we call a resultative state. Because you dynamically moved to Oxford, your resultative position is now statically at Oxford. And this exact same mechanism governs 3-dimensional volumes too. Diving into the water is the dynamic path that results in the static state of being in the water.
Furthermore, when a trajector isn't just arriving somewhere but passing by, the rules of geometric dimensions still strictly dictate the grammar of that passage. Moving across something requires a one-dimensional line, like a border, or a two-dimensional surface, like a playing field. but moving through a space rigorously demands that three-dimensional volume concept we talked about. You walk across a lawn, sure, but you absolutely must walk through a forest, through a tunnel, or through a doorway. The physical boundaries literally dictate the preposition.
Moving right along to Section 4, Relative Positioning and Orientation.
Now, the precision of English verticality is quite remarkable. We have a very clear dichotomy when objects relate to one another. Above and below indicate being on a higher or lower altitude coordinate. A castle sits above a valley. It's a very general relationship. However, over and underneath imply a direct vertical alignment, and very often they require contiguous, actual physical contact. Think about it. You pull a blanket over yourself to cover your body. You definitely do not pull a blanket above yourself, right? That would be floating. Similarly, under implies being physically covered or hidden by a surface, whereas below is simply just a lower point on a map.
Relative positioning also introduces this really cool concept of desis, or the dictic center. Words like beyond or phrases like up the road literally cannot function in a vacuum. They strictly require establishing the x, y, z coordinates of the speaker's physical body in real time. In this way, the grammar acts just like a compass. It's highly relative and it is firmly anchored to the observer's exact location and visual perspective.
This brings us to Section 5, Dialectical Variations and Extensions.
So far, we've outlined this universal geometric framework, but let's see how this actually shifts across different communities. Applying a World English's perspective reveals that this prepositional framework is not entirely uniform. And for absolute C2 mastery, well, you have to know your audience. In British English, being at school typically means you're enrolled there, right? You're functioning at that institutional point. But in American English, in school means you're enrolled, while at school strictly means you are physically standing on the campus grounds at that moment. Even historical linguistic shifts matter here. When describing circular motion, British speakers often preserve words like about or round, whereas American English has heavily favored the standardized around.
And you know, even within the exact same dialect, your choice of preposition acts as a pretty powerful tool of rhetorical manipulation. Linguists distinguish between functional conceptualization and topological conceptualization. If you state you're studying at Oxford, you're applying a functional conceptualization. In this context, Oxford is merely an institution. It's a zero-dimensional point on your resume. But if you dramatically declare you're trapped in Oxford, you've utilized topological conceptualization. You've instantly transformed the town into a three-dimensional structural enclosure that's confining you. It's the same place, but a totally different grammatical reality.
We also see semantic extension. This is where these physical, geometric prepositions naturally evolve to express a pervasive meaning or absolute saturation. While words like throughout are uniquely built for this, just watch how basic prepositions stretch their definitions. A garden isn't just accompanying bees, it is buzzing with bees. The ground is covered with snow. The preposition with transforms here from a simple tool of accompaniment into a powerful spatial marker of physical abundance.
Now we are reaching the conclusion of our explainer with Section 6, Pedagogical Implications and Scholars.
Everything, and I mean all the mechanisms we've decoded today are backed by highly rigorous academic study. We've woven in the dimensional matrices of Quirk and Greenbaum and the brilliant cognitive semantics of Tyler and Evans. Add in the expansive syntactic analyses by folks like Downing, Biber, and Huddleston and Pullum, and we essentially have universal academic agreement on this. Prepositions are not mere connective tissue. They are, in fact, the most structurally complex units of spatial cognition operating in the English language.
Which brings us to the absolute core pedagogical takeaway for the educators and advanced learners watching today. You have got to abandon rote memorization. Treating these words as just grammatical glue is a huge disservice to their complexity. They are the primary mathematical tools for establishing the spatial coordinates of discourse. Achieving real native-like fluency means thoroughly understanding this geometric perspective-dependent landscape we've just mapped out.
And that leaves us with a rather profound thought to end on today. We've explored how English expertly turns dimensions, motion, and human perspective into hard, fast syntax. So if the language we speak is this deeply mathematically geometric, how might mastering these spatial coordinates ultimately reshape the very way you perceive the physical world around you? Think about that the next time you decide whether you're sitting on the grass or in it. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.